Good morning. Welcome to Corona Walks 9. Risk the international scene and politics. I've tried to stay away from these themes up until now, although I haven't been entirely successful, and I have to confess I've had the odd jibe against the government. But we're in a situation now where it's impossible to see how COVID-19 is going to be managed without some kind of forthright political decision making. And this goes up above even governments, although governments clearly have the power to do an awful lot of damage, as we've seen in 4 countries in the world. I mentioned in one of my earlier videos about communication, stressing that corona was not a national problem, it's not a regional problem, it's an international problem. It's a problem that infects the entire world. You can get this everywhere. Now, it appears to have taken a hold in certain places, far more than others. It's appearing to have differing death tolls in different areas. This is sometimes to do with the management locally by the government or the authorities, and it's sometimes to do, it would appear, to do with the climate, to do with the time of year. So, for example, here in Europe, flus typically do their damage in the winter time, and they seem to get less in the summer and cause less harm. Or this could be that just old people are more susceptible to whatever comes along in the winter time and less susceptible in the summertime. And that might be just a regional difference. So I tried to do some trawling on the internet. History of the flu. Of course, you have the big one, 1718, Spanish flu. 1946, there was a big flu. 1968, there was a big flu. 1957 was another one. 57, 58. And then, of course, we have the one we currently have. And I tried to see, is there a pattern amongst these flus? I'm not a biologist, I'm not a scientist, not that kind of scientist. And the one disturbing pattern across each of these over the last 110 years is that the second wave killed more than the first, often by a very large margin. I repeat, the second wave of the flu killed more than the first, and it did it by a large margin. If this applies to what we're currently looking at, then we've seen nothing yet. And this autumn, we better hold on to our hats, because it may well sweep through the population again, and this time with far more devastating results. Now, I can't explain the ins and outs of why that takes place and why flus behave in that way. One possible explanation is that the flu, once it gets out in the population and many people have it, it's more opportunities for that flu to mutate, and eventually one of those mutations will happen. And when it happens, even the work we've done up until now to produce vaccines and to try to control it may well prove to be futile. We're looking at something that cuts through human systems like a hot knife through butter. The one thing we as humans do is socialize. We talk, we love, we laugh, we dance, we do things together. We get together, we meet in groups, and we discuss things together. It's the one thing that Corona doesn't let us do. If this is an international problem, then as a human race, we've probably not been very successful at all. There are islands of success. New Zealand. But I switched the news on this morning and the Prime Minister of New Zealand is apologising. Somehow, Corona's got into the system again. This morning on the TV it tells me that in Beijing The city is virtually in lockdown, more than 1,000 flights cancelled, and it all concentrates round another wet market. Are we learning nothing? Nothing at all? Are we just repeating the same mistakes? What strikes me as disturbing about this is if this really is an international problem, if this really requires international cooperation, our experience of our leaders to date has been less than encouraging, shall I say. Look at global warming and the agreements on global warming, which have been made, broken, made, broken, made, broken. Let's try and look at this from another point of view. Lockdown. Personally, I think locking everybody up because there are a few people out there that are dangerous is the wrong way to do it. We should be locking up the people who've got it until they're clear and letting everybody else circulate. But we choose to do it the other way round. Why? Because that's how we've always done it. Instead of thinking this is a crisis, we need new thinking, let's apply the old thinking and pour it in with shovel loads. Tracing apps. Good idea. I've been advocating these in these videos. Let's get out there, find out where these people are and really do what we have to do to take them temporarily out of the community so that they can recover themselves and so that they don't spread this to other people. But is there any cooperation? Do I see governments working together to produce an app that could be used throughout the world? Do we see governments working together, talking about how we're going to manage this terrible event? 4 governments stand out as textbook examples of how not to do it. And I'm ashamed to say the UK is one of those. America seems to be even much worse. I think Brazil's just stepped into 3rd position in terms of deaths and infections. As a human race, the infection rate has gone up, not down. The number of people in the world who've got this just keeps going on and on. Instead of stamping it out, we're spreading it about. And as it gets into poorer countries and countries with less sophisticated health systems, we're going to see the devastation far worse, as they won't even be able to put in place the rather backward plans that we've tried with limited success to apply. I mean, even when I look at the governments of Europe, who've been quite successful at controlling the outbreak, although at first, certainly in the Mediterranean, it seemed to be very badly managed indeed. They had at least the advantage of ignorance, no idea what was coming, and it hit them between the eyes. One can at least credit them with that misfortune. Unlike some of the North European governments like Britain and Sweden, who knew fully well what they were facing and just exposed their population to it. And then we have the sort of semi-totalitarian, semi-democratic, I don't really know where to put Russia in that basket, or Brazil at the moment. Yes, they have a democratic system, people do vote, but strange things seem to happen to people that don't like who gets to win the election. Like they end up stabbing themselves or shooting themselves. And other such weird stories. Or being poisoned in other countries. The world needs to wake up. This is the one time in the world that we need to get the governments of the world together, and these people need to talk. It doesn't matter whether they are communist, non-elected, elected by a minority, as is the case in the UK and the US, or elected by the majority, as is still the old-fashioned concept of democracy practiced in many European countries. These governments need to sit round a table and talk. How do we stop this? The priority is not the economy. The economy is important, of course, but the economy will suffer far worse in a vigorous second wave of Corona-19. And if that's not prevented, we've got months now. It's June, July, August, September. By late September, this thing could be back again. And it will be back with a vengeance. We must stop it. Now is the time to act. Now is the time for governments to be responsible. If you know anybody in government, please share this video with them. Thank you very much. Professor Edward Borodžić, here in Bavaria, in the most beautiful woods, and it's just started to rain, so it's a good job I'm finishing the video just here. See you again soon. Bye.